Hi, hello, and welcome to FactCheck. We're looking at IT layoffs today, and the idea is to understand from the top as well as from the bottom what are the real numbers in terms of net additions and deletions. Of course, there is big concern on layoffs, but there have also been layoffs happening for many years now, as companies have shed some workforce who they've found not up to the mark and so on. But obviously the numbers have gathered steam, but there is still some doubt, if not concern, on whether the numbers are real or to what extent are they real. So I'm joined by Karan Torani of Dolat Capital, who's an senior IT analyst, and let's try and work this through with him. Karan, thanks for joining us. So how would you like to go about it? So should we pick an example from the top, or should we, should we look at the overall numbers, or should we take an example of a company like a Wipro or an Infosys or a TCS?
I guess looking at the overall numbers would be better. So I'll just give you an example of TCS, for example. They are the bellwether of Indian IT industry. They have the maximum amount of headcount today. Typically, 6 years back, when I'm talking about 2011, 2012, they used to give a guidance of gross addition of employees. Okay, now this is the gross addition, not the net addition. So there was a gross addition. After that, there was some attrition, and that gave the number of the net addition which was there. Gross addition used to be roughly in the range of 50 to 60,000 when their employee base was around 2.5 lakh. So you were talking about a number of about 15 to 20% of employee gross add which was there. Typically, out of this 50, 60,000 gross add number, 70% of this was the freshers and the entry level people. In fact, 70 to 75%. It was a very high component of the fresher addition which was there, and the latter addition was extremely low because of that. So this was a scenario which was 5-6 years back. Now coming to the scenario today, so TCS has stopped giving gross hiring guidance right now today. They don't give any kind of hiring guidance today. And at current situation, I would expect them to do a gross addition of not more than 15 to 20,000. So that number has actually become 1/3 as compared to that. Plus, there's a huge change over here. So 50,000 on that base number, they were doing about 75% of entry level. Now on this number of 15, 18,000, now they're going to about 70% of laterals. So the requirement based on the changing dynamics of the industry, based on digital services, based on higher amount of people needed to go on site, you really need a huge amount of lateral base to be there in your company. And that is the strategic huge shift that has happened in the last 5-6 years in Indian IT industry.
Right. So if you were to take the TCS example, you're saying that 15 to 20,000 people will be added this year. So that means it's not going to be a net deletion. It is going to be a net addition. So 15,000 over 387,000 roughly. Am I correct?
15 to 20,000 is roughly the guidance that I would look at for the gross, and for the net it could go to about 10, 12,000 number. That could be anybody's guess, but that would roughly be the number in terms of that. But again, if you see in overall attrition basis, there is a lot of panicking happening in terms of the number not even being there. The only problem where it will happen is that entry level guys will be asked to move out. So the lateral addition will actually continue. As I told you, 70% of this 15,000 number would be the lateral addition. So the lateral addition part will continue, but your entry level people are the ones who will be asked to move out. So which is why today also, if you see most of these guys who are complaining, most of these guys who formed a union, they are basically people sitting on the bench without any projects. They are people who are recently hired, say about 6 months back or 1 year back. So that is where the problem is. The laterals are still in a very safe spot as of now.
So when you say laterals, you mean those who have more than 5 to 7 years experience?
Correct. So lateral will be fall in the range of over 3 to 5 years experience. That's the range which you're looking at for laterals.
Right. So if I were to come back to the numbers, so therefore we are saying that the industry is still adding jobs. While the composition is changing, as you've pointed out, the net addition. So if TCS is 387,000 today, it's most likely going to be 397,000 or 400,000 next year. Would that be a fair assumption?
No, again, the thing is the overall attrition in terms of your entry level guys will shoot up drastically. So the headcount base may actually fall down going ahead. That may be a scenario.
So can any guesstimates on that number?
No guesstimates as such. You've been seeing reading reports, TCS, Infosys and all companies. Cognizant, for example, they will be laying out 2,000 employees. So roughly about 2.5% of the employee base could be asked to leave. And these would be largely your entry-level people or the non-performers. So people are talking about 2 to 4% kind of firing happening as a percentage of the overall employee base. So if you're talking about a roughly 4 lakh base of TCS, you're talking about a good number of about 9 odd thousand people. Now, out of this, 70% would be your entry level people. In fact, 80% would be entry level people, and balance would be the non-performers in the lateral side, basically.
Right. But that's been happening in the past as well, right, Karan?
The past it's been happening, but the thing is, as I told you, even the hiring for the entry level people has been extremely high. But now there's no requirement of the entry level people, so that will have a negative impact overall on the headcount base.
Right. So if I were to, come back to the gross number, the final number after a year. So is it going to be more than 400,000 or less than 400,000 as an estimate for TCS?
As an estimate, what I feel is it will decline by about good 8-10,000.
Okay, from the number that we have today.
Yes, correct, yes.
Okay, so that's TCS now. How do you see this playing out in other companies? I mean, whether we take names or don't take names, but because some of the smaller companies, for instance, have different product mixes, some may be more focused towards the digital consumer as opposed to, let's say, the traditional consumer. So could things play out differently?
So structurally, if you see as an industry standpoint, this number will keep on becoming lower every year because the entry level and the non-performers will be moved out of the system. The problem here is what is happening in terms of demand. There is a huge demand for digital services. Okay, digital services as a component of the revenue is hardly about 15 to 18% for Infosys, TCS, Wipro, and all. And these are the kind of businesses which are going to grow going ahead. These are the kind of businesses which will drive the overall revenue growth. The only problem here is these businesses require a huge on-site presence. Okay, now having on-site presence means you need to send a lot of people on-site. That is one option. But because of visa, even that is now not going to play out because people are not going to move on-site. So you need to do a lot of local hiring. So there are even chances that people who are there on-site may be asked to leave as well. And that could promote the local hiring, but that will not have an impact in terms of overall employee count numbers. But again, the mix could change. You could have more of local hires and less of the local Indian people, moving abroad and working on site. So that is also one trend which you're seeing as of now.
Right. So if I were to recap this, you're saying that entry level is going to face pressure. People perhaps who are not able to reskill and move into, let's say, digital services will face pressure. But
absolutely,
those who have the skills also, but actually will find more opportunities, because you are also saying that we are likely to see more lateral movement.
No, lateral movement will be basically on the offshore side, but not on the on-site side. So on-site hiring is clearly going to pick up by the local hiring, which is there because of visa issues recently. So that is also going to impact the on-site Indian guys who basically go on-site and work.
Okay, so we'll look at the two separate. So let's look at entry level first. What's your sense on entry level? I mean, what is the kind of dip that we are likely to see in the coming year or two overall?
I mean, the dip number, as I told you, I mean, that number, for example, 50,000 they were adding about 5 years back, or 60,000 was a gross hire addition 5 years back. Out of that, roughly about 50,000 was by the entry level guys. And that number could significantly go down or probably even be negative. Like it could be about 2-3,000 gross ads, or it could even go negative given the current scenario which is there.
Okay, so you're saying that people who are aspiring to go into the IT industry, particularly those who've passed out from engineering colleges and so on, they are the ones who should be now thinking twice, or not putting all their eggs in the IT basket.
Absolutely. It's a huge spot of bother because even out of the entry level guys, those who are extremely good, those who are extremely talented in terms of adopting the digital services, and I'm assuming out of the overall entry level base, it could be only 10% who would be extremely talented and who would have a skill set to adopt those digital in a very fast way. Otherwise, the 90% would face a lot of pressures in terms of getting a job or getting some kind of career out of the IT industry.
So if you're saying 90% is what is likely to face pressure today or not get those jobs, which is almost 9 out of 10, and this number you're saying would have been what, 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 6 years ago?
No, so 6 years ago, it was like everything. Like everybody was given a job because there was a huge demand for the entry level programmers. Now that's not there now. Now the entry level jobs have been moved towards automation, so there's no need for people to do the entry level work. That is the shift that is happening.
Right. So now, obviously these companies are still running, running at scale, and they need people. So you're saying that most companies are likely to survive and thrive in some ways with their existing staff rather than focusing on new ones.
Correct. And one more reason why they will cut the cost in terms of existing headcount offshore is because when you hire the people on site, okay, there are two things that happens. Once hire the people on site, the local hiring. So for example, if I have a center in US and if I have an Indian working over there, he's working at a 10 to 15% salary lower than the local American guy. Okay, so that is one negative impact. The second thing is the Indian guy working in America today at my on-site center will have a high utilization rate. Utilization rate over there on-site for the Indian guy is about 90%, 95%. But when I hire an American guy, my utilization rates declines from 90% to 80, 85%. So because to offset these two negative impacts, they will clearly fire people offshore. So that is the trend which is happening.
Right. So, okay. So let's look at offshore now. So how many Indians, mostly through H1B or entirely through H1B, I'm reckoning, would go abroad in a year, and what is that hit going to be like?
So Indians, in terms of, if you see overall, there are about 60, 70,000 visas that are issued, and based on that number of Indians go abroad. But now I don't see this number being as high, because even this year, if you see, the visa cap was not full. So most of the companies in the likes of Infosys and all, applied for lesser number of visas that they used to always do, because they also know that the Indians don't have a future there in terms of working on site. They will need to hire people locally over there in the American centers.
Right. And if you look at the total number of H1B visas issued or people working with H1B visas for Indian IT companies, I mean, what is that number today and what is that likely to become?
So there's a cap on the H1B visa, and it's about 60 plus 20, plus 20 L1 and 60 H1B. So about 80,000 is the visa number which is issued, and this is issued by the American over there, American whatever consulate, and roughly about 60-70% of this is used by the Indian IT vendors. But this number could decline to 30-40% because of the higher local hiring which they'll be forced to do because of H1B concerns.
Right. But so therefore you're saying those who are affected by H1B, that number is not likely to be more than 20-30,000, even assuming there is a severe clampdown.
Yes, correct.
I mean, as total number of Indian IT engineers correct. Who are sitting in the US today, who may not, let's say, be able to go and get a green card as many of them desire and then come back.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Last set of questions, Karan. So if you were to look ahead now, what's the composition of job creation looking to you? I mean, is it possible that there could be new kinds of jobs or job streams, or are we now clearly entering a phase where, with digital, we are clearly seeing shrinkage of opportunity, and obviously we may not have the necessary skills to feed it, and therefore the industry itself is going to go more into a plateau to downward trajectory in terms of growing in people?
Yes, as you rightly pointed out, the industry will move towards a plateau to downward trajectory in terms of a number of people, because there is no need for so many people. If you see in terms of utilization, they're already operating at about 80-85% kind of utilization, which is extremely high, historically high levels of utilization. So I'm sensing, there's a huge concern in terms of the overall employment sector per se for the IT industry as of now, and that will remain to be for the next 3-4 years unless there's a huge change, because frankly speaking, digital is the growth driver, and digital does not require human. It is based on automation, the entire technology base. So that is surely going to impact the job scenario for IT industry.
Right. So, the IT Minister, Ravi Shankar Prasad, has said that, one is he's talked about no downturn in employment and the digital economy will take over. He's speaking about the digital economy and the domestic economy. What's your sense there? Could the domestic economy counterbalance all this that we've talked about, and if so, to what extent?
Domestic economy could be in the sense of the domestic IT projects and other stuff like that. But if you see in terms of the overall IT spend, and if you see in terms of the market, domestic IT is not as big industry as exports is. So even though domestic might grow faster than their exports, I mean, in terms of if you see a comparison, domestic IT industry grows by about 14-15% today roughly, versus the exports which is growing at about 6-8%, because NASSCOM didn't come out with guidance this year, but this is roughly the range if you see. So the component is extremely strong. In terms of overall IT services, the domestic component would be about 80 billion is the 70 to 80 billion is the exports, about $15-20 billion would be your domestic component. So as a component, it's very small. It's about 25-30% of the overall IT spend. So it may impact marginally positive in terms of job creation and other stuff, but it can surely not negate the entire impact of this Indian IT vendors who are laying off people. So the entire impact will not be negated because of the domestic industry.
Right. So, and last question, Karan. So, are you seeing any silver linings in the cloud or green shoots, at least from this perspective?
So as of now, if you see, digital services is a very small component of TCS Infosys. As I told you, it's about mid-teens as a percentage of revenue. So in terms of overall impact, in terms of share price performance, in terms of delivery of numbers, in terms of margin improvement, and get so that will surely not happen for the next 3-4 years. I think next 3-4 years they're all geared up into investment phase where the margins will not grow, and they want to invest into acquisitions. They want to acquire companies which are probably low margin nature, and once they get to the scale of about 30-40% of revenues as a percentage of digital, then that's when you see the entire positive impact coming in and the scenario changing. But as of now, for the next 3 years, I think structurally it's going to be a negative for the Indian IT vendors.
Right, Karan Torani of Dolat Capital, thank you so much for joining us. We run out of time completely. Do join us in future on our Facebook Live. Also follow us on Twitter at boomlive-in, and also keep watching and checking out our fact checks as we try and get to the bottom of important issues like this one. Thanks for watching.